Anyway, Scott Derrickson, everybody. Yeah, exactly. Have a seat. Yeah. Hi, guys. Hi.
The Saw franchise.
No, let's not talk about that. Maybe the first one. This should have been Guillermo del Toro. Let me disappoint a huge room full of people. Apparently they asked him first. I'm not the guy they go to first. Everyone in this room right now is like, fuck, it's good. We could have been seeing Guillermo del Toro.
He was
James Bond's friend? But it's not about me and my disappointment that you asked Guillermo first. It's about you, because you made a great film.
Thank you.
Do we all agree? I'm gonna go real wild card here. The mask that's on the poster, which was designed by Tom Savini. Is that like that iconic? Because obviously you're leading with it in the marketing. Were you like, I want to create an iconic mask, like a silhouette that people in 30 years will be like, bang? Like, is that like why else go to Tom Savini? Like, what was the thinking? Because you could have gone quite simple with it, or stripped back. What made you want to go with like something that forward and that demonic?
In the script, there's no mask in Joe Hill's short story it's based on. So in the script, all we had it was a leather mask, like an antique leather mask with a smile painting of a devil and a clown devil, like a comedy tragedy devil mask. That was it. Because we got Ethan Hawke, I started thinking, I'd like to see his face a little bit, That's actually how it started. And then when I was in pre-production, so that's how I came up with the idea of splitting the mask. But then I just realized two things. One, it started out of fear. Because it was like, oh, we're going to use this mask to market the movie. There's no version of whatever it is. That's not going to be the marketing campaign, is Ethan in a mask. And so it started out of my nervousness of that. But then I started thinking about, well, wait a minute, he is a serial killer. The great tradition of, serial killers in cinema, and Freddy, and not Freddy, but Michael Myers and Jason and Ghostface. And I thought maybe we could do something more interesting, and different, progressive, that's has iconic quality. So I was reaching for that, for sure, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it sort of leads into the casting of Ethan Hawke, because the character, obviously, you never really see his face. And so when you were writing it, were you thinking, oh, I'm going to cast someone no one knows? And, like, if you were thinking that, how did you go from that to Ethan Hawke, who's so recognizable?
It goes back to the mask, actually. So didn't write it for Ethan. We wrote it kind of like Joe's short story. In the short story, he's really based on John Wayne Gacy. So he's a clown, he's overweight, and we kind of wrote him that way. Joe was the first person to read the screenplay, and I think he read it right after it had come out. And I remember his first response was, "He can't be a clown, not now." And it was Joe's idea to make him a kind of this kind of antique style magician, and which I thought was great. So we changed that, and then, but there were no masks in the story. I really liked the idea of him always wearing a mask, and so my first thought was, he's got to have a great voice. Who's an actor who's got a distinctive voice, and I just think Ethan has one of the most distinctive voices of anybody I've ever met. And when you talk to him, even in just conversationally, his voice is all over the place. He's got this kind of high light thing that he does, and the dark, growly, and he's just got these different ways, and his voice is so distinctive and so recognizable. And it started with that. It started with me thinking, who can perform behind a mask? Who can actually pull this off and make it interesting? And then the more I thought about Ethan, I just think he's so creative, and he's in a place in his. We've stayed in touch since we made Sinister, and he's just in such an amazing spot in his career where he's taking these really wild risks. And so I called him and I offered him the role. And he said, "I don't play villains." Yeah, he just goes, "I don't really play villains." And I thought, oh my God, he doesn't. I didn't even really think about it. And he said, yeah, I just think that if you're going to really expose that darkness in yourself, people have a hard time unseeing it. And I said, okay, and he said, look, I'll read it, but what he said specifically was, it'll have to be some real Jack Nicholson and Shining shit. And I said, oh, okay, man. So I sent him the script. He said, I'll read it right away. And I went to bed the next morning. There was a voicemail on my cell phone. And when I listened to the voicemail, it was him in the Grammer's voice that you hear in the movie saying one of the lines from the script. He messaged this way of telling me he was going to do it.
I think you're right when you say he's in this interesting phase of his career where he's like been there, done that with everything. So now he's just like, yeah, sure, I'll be a Viking, sure, I'll do it. Like when you said to him, how early on did you say, oh, and by the way, we're never going to see your face? What was his reaction?
Well, when he said, I don't really play villains, because all I said at first was it was the villain of the movie, and he said, I don't really play villains. He said the Jack Nicholson thing. I said, okay, well, let me just further talk you out of it. A, he's a sadistic pedophile killer, and child killer, and B, he wears a mask, you never see his face. And so I never thought he would do it. I think the mask is one of the main reasons he did it, because I think that he really took on, he has a great love for the history of theater and all of that, and the tradition of that. And I think that he thought it was a great challenge, So, and then when he saw the actual masks, he had a visceral response to them, and immediately, I think, altered how he was going to approach everything. And he said to me, these are so good, and it's scary, this really frees me up to do a lot more, because I can let the mask do what the mask does, for the character. And I was like, that's the whole idea, is that, the Grabber either built these or bought these somewhere, and he wears each individual piece when he does for very specific reasons of fear and intimidation, of expression towards his victims. And I think I think Ethan was able to do so many of the interesting things that he does because he wasn't trying to play anything scary. That was already there, inherent in what he was acting behind.
Well, it's because his face is so recognizable that when you put the mask on that changes the lower half of his face, it's interesting how you no longer see Ethan Hawke. Like if the nose and the mouth are different, you still recognize Ethan Hawke's eyes, but I didn't fall into that trap of like, I feel safe with this guy because he's a movie star, because it didn't look like Ethan Hawke.
Yeah. You never really get a clean look at Ethan Hawke, the actor. He's always got something present. Yeah. The closest is the white makeup at the beginning, but they use shots in the marketing and the trailers. I don't really, that's not my area, but they use shots that I didn't put in the film, because you don't even see that in the movie. There's more in the marketing campaign you never see at the space in the film. Yeah.
I mean, after Doctor Strange, I can imagine you were in a position where you had so much freedom to pick what you wanted to do next. I'm curious, like, what choosing your next film once you've done a film like Doctor Strange becomes this high stakes game of like, what am I going to do next? What made you go, this is it, this is the one? Like, this is the one I want to spend a year of my life on?
I mean, I made a decision right before I made Sinister. Well, a year or two before I made Sinister, because I was not very employable at that time. And I just, because I had really found myself at the end of somebody else's movie, and before making Sinister, and I just made a decision then that was never going to happen again. That I wasn't going to, I just wasn't going to make somebody else's movie for them. And I also decided I would not think strategically about what I do. So I never give any thought to, I'll do a big movie and then I'll do something smaller and then I'll try to do this kind of, for me, I try to approach each thing that I do, for better or for worse, as though it'll be the last movie I'll ever make, because one day it will be, And so after Doctor Strange, I didn't have any thoughts about what's the smart thing to do now or what's the expectation. It was just an inevitability that it would be this. I had written the screenplay while I was still in prep for the sequel to Doctor Strange, before I stepped off that movie. And the writer that we had hired to do the first draft of that script, it was taking a long time to get that draft done. So a writing partner and I wrote this in like 6 weeks, And so when I stepped off, there it was, and it was a really personal script, to write. And I really wrote it for really personal reasons. So it became obvious that this is the next thing I'm going to do. I'll make this.
I mean, you get, like you said, it's so personal for you. Like, I know, you're a huge fan of 70s rock, and also you grew up in Denver, and there's so many things that reflect your own life. Was it surreal at times to be standing on set looking around going, oh, I'm standing in my own life?
Oh, yeah, especially in front of like the red brick house, that's looks exactly like the house I grew up in, like eerily so. But yeah, it was that was the whole, I had read Joe's short story 15, 16 years ago when it was first published. And I always thought The Black Phone was an amazing idea for a movie because it combined a serial killer story and a ghost story. It's like, that's so interesting, and I hadn't seen it done that way, and it was full of all this empathy and love, even though the subject matter was so grim. I just could feel a great movie in there, but how to expand that very short story into a movie, never could figure out how to do that. And I had spent 2 or 3 years, almost 3 years, in therapy, mostly talking about my childhood and like the violence of my childhood and growing up in North Denver, and I just felt like I had all this, I had unearthed all this, real reality from myself, and combining that with Joe's story was the way that we were able to expand it. Was most of the kids, and there's only one victim in Joe's short story. The other kids are straight kids from my childhood. The Robin Ariano character is a real kid who really said most of the things. The whole thing. I was just gonna wail on him a bit, but that wouldn't draw no blood. Word for word, what this kid said to me after I saw him just turn another kid's face into a hamburger. Yeah, so it was very cathartic. It was really wonderful to be able to come out of a long process of sort of looking inward and looking back. And typically when you're talking about kids that age and looking back, it's very nostalgic, and I was, for me, it was just the opposite. It was like looking back to unearth, the fact that my childhood was mostly fear. That's mostly what I felt as a kid. And so the 70s thing was about trying to recreate the feeling of the 70s to me, what it felt like to me at that age, as opposed to fetishizing any particular aspects of it. And then being on set and recreating those, so many of the things on the inside of the house, those wood panels where you can see the circles of the branches that were, it all is so distinctive. And I found, we didn't shoot it in Denver, we shot it in North Carolina. And I was just so fortunate to find like all these little pieces that felt very recognizably to me what that time and place in North Denver felt like to me.
Yeah, I mean, there's when you talk about movies where there's younger actors, kid actors, teen actors, like, there are films that stand out where you can see that the kids have been directed so well, like E.T.'s one that comes to mind. Like, I really feel like the 2 lead performances, especially the lead, really joined that pantheon of like amazing performances by younger actors. Like, did you have a different approach with them, if any at all, when handling them, or did you just approach them like adult actors on the set? I mean,
I've cast a lot of kids. I do think, the one true movie god smiled on me and gave me both of these kids. I'd be fortunate to have found one that was as good as either Madeline McGraw, who plays Gwen, or Mason, who plays Finney. But the fact that I got both of them in the same movie is a miracle. I saw a lot of people, but them and even the kids that I had in Sinister and kids I've dealt with in other productions, I do talk to them like adults. I can only cast kids who can understand and receive emotionally intentioned direction, because it's the only way I really, and it's not like I just don't change how I talk to them, and that's a big part of the audition process, is do they have the maturity and intelligence and instinct to hear things like that and be able to receive them. And both those kids really can't. Madeline, less direction. She just kind of embodied that character. And I think that what she does in the whipping scene is some of the best acting I've ever seen. You know, and I can tell you more stories about shooting that. Mason had never been in front of a camera, as far as I know. You know, he'd never done a feature film. We found him in Texas. We were going to schools and drama departments to find kids, and it just became clear to me while I was doing callback auditions with him that his ability to hear a direction and then deliver an emotional process in the scene immediately after that was so thorough, not overacting, performances in his eyes, in his gesture, in his looks, where he looks, it's so truthful. And that's the thing, in my experience, if you talk to kids about what's happening to the character, just like you would an adult, just make it clear, this is what's happening to this character right now. This is what's just happened. Just remind, this is where you're coming from in each take. This is where you're going, and in this shot, this is what's happening. And then trust them to receive that, and then be truthful about that little slice that you're capturing. They are so truthful. They're just so they have an ability that I think most adults don't have, even adult actors, which is this ability to just find the truthfulness in that moment. And Mason, you know, I didn't think I realized how good his performance was until I cut the movie together. And then I just started seeing so many more little nuances of little things he was doing, and when it was all put together, I think his performance is flawless. I think he does not miss a beat in the whole movie, which is, for a child performance, is incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it's always incredible to me if I'm watching a movie where a so-called non-actor, someone they just found,
right?
You know, like, I don't know, Fish Tank or something like that, where you're like, we just found this girl at a train station and said, do you want to be in a movie? There's that amazing purity that happens where you're like, they're not acting because they haven't been given the tools to act, so there's no performance. It's just like this total honesty blasting you in the face. Like, did you have any moments on set with Mason where you were like watching him, and any particular moments you remember where he just went way beyond the script that just leveled you, where it was like, oh my God?
I'll talk about the whipping scene in Madeline, actually, for that. Because, you know, the most exciting thing for a director, at least for me as a director, by far, the greatest thing about being a filmmaker is getting to watch actors do what they do. And when they take, you know, you've written the words, you've written the scene, and when they can take a scene and go somewhere beyond what you've written and make something living really happen that services the words but goes well beyond that. And when we were, you know, I really prepared Madeline and Jeremy Davies in that whipping scene about, you know, how I wasn't going to show the belt actually hitting her body. I picked the location with the counter in it to sort of hide the actual on-camera violence. You know, I think you only see her get hit one time, and the rest of it's all, you know, sound and behind. But you really feel the violence of what's happening there. But I made it very clear to her how emotional this scene had to be and what the progression of emotions was. And by the time she's on the floor, she breaks, you know, and she understood that. And when she gets up from that counter, she's broken, you know, and she is really weeping at that point. This 9-year-old girl, and Jeremy Davies is, you know, method actor, you know, for sure, and he's very into what he's doing. And Jeremy improv'd the bit about saying it 3 times, making her say, "My dreams are just dreams." That wasn't in the script. And so when he says, say it, "My dreams are just," she's crying. She says, "My dreams are just dreams." He's like, "Say it again." Total improv. He said, "My dreams are just dreams." Tears pouring down her face. He's like, "Say it again." And Madeline, the actress, like almost turns feral. And then she goes, "My dreams are just dreams." And it's like, I was blown away, because it was like she understood her character so well. At 9 years old, she was just like, Gwen's gonna get pushed only so far ever by anyone before she fights back. You know, and it startled, I think, Jeremy. You can see it in the take, you know, it sort of diffuses the whole thing. You know, because I think he as an actor didn't expect it. He is really quiet. That would all happen alive. You know, that's the greatest thing in filmmaking,
You know, when you can have moments like that happen, and for it to happen, you know, with a seasoned actor and this 9-year-old, it's just wonderful.
And you get to take credit for it and be like, oh yeah, we planned it all. I'm a genius. Genius. What a great line. I wrote it. Yeah. 3 times I wrote it. My co-writer wrote it once and I was like, oh no.
No.
They're going to play the hell out of this. I mean, you know, we're sort of joking about those moments on set, but like, I think one of the beautiful things about making a film, is, especially a lower budget film, is the camaraderie and everybody being together. Did shooting during the height of COVID in 2020, kill the camaraderie a little bit in terms of how did you find the whole barriers of like PPE and like you have to have your food delivered and all these weird new things we were dealing with? Because, you know, I don't know anyone who shot a film during the height of that.
Yeah,
that time.
We shot it right in the center of all that. Yeah, it was definitely the least social production I've ever been a part of. You can't recognize anybody. Everybody's in a mask, and it was raining all the time. Everybody's got black rain gear on, you know, so you can't recognize anybody from the crew. You know, you literally, even in the set, you have to call out people's names to know who's who most of the time. And so there's no chit chat. There's no real getting to know each other. But for some reason, this movie, it really somehow benefited because we had such a tight schedule. We only had 33 days. Knew they weren't going to let me go over that schedule, and people worked so efficiently because of it. It was like I think people liked what they were seeing and saw these kids putting their heart into this movie, and everybody just performed at a high level in every department. But typically, there is a lot more camaraderie, you know, between yourself and actors and each other. And in this case, that honestly didn't really happen much. You know,
sounds depressing, but it was good for the movie.
It was it was a hard shoot. You know, it was raining and muddy and cold, and we were all, you know, couldn't recognize each other. But it turned out okay.
Like, is there a whiplash that happens going from something like Doctor Strange, where there's a whole bunch of problems, but time isn't one of them? Like, we have time and money.
That's untrue.
Is there?
Yeah, I mean, Sinister was $3 million. This was 17. Doctor Strange was over 200. It's all, every production is the same. You don't have enough time. You don't have enough money.
Right, you just reverse engineer the budget into the. But in terms of like, is there a whiplash in terms of like, oh my god, how many scenes do we have to shoot today? Like when you go from something like Doctor Strange to something like this, and you're just confronted with that 30-day schedule, is there a part of you that's like, how am I even going to do this? Or do you just slip back?
The honest truth is, these days, shooting something on a tight schedule when you have more material that you have to get is a lot more energizing. Because you work harder, you work faster. Your mind doesn't really let up in terms of creatively thinking, what do I really need? What's critical? What's not? All of that. I didn't shoot much coverage on this movie, you know, and the way that it's shot, it was not, you know, there's a lot of precision camera work in it that sort of betrays the schedule. That stuff takes a lot of time to set up. But what I did do is I shot listed or storyboarded every single scene in the movie with my DP before we started production, because I knew it was the only way we'd make that schedule. And I handed off a fair amount of material to my now wife, Maggie Levin, who's here, who shot Second Unit. She's a great director, and I when they told me the schedule, we were in prep. I didn't know it was going to be as short as it was, and I just said, we'll never make that schedule. And I said, the only possible way is if you give me, I think it was like 8 or 9 days. I don't remember what it was. I think I said I need 8 days of Second Unit for what would be principal photography, and you got to let me choose the Second Unit director. And it was Maggie, and so she shot like the flashback Super 8 stuff of Bruce Dumont. It was all her. And there's not a lot of directors I would have trusted to get exactly what I needed from that. So that was also the way we made the schedule. But Marvel movies work that way. Second Unit shoots a shit ton on every Marvel movie, but those shoots are usually like, I think Doctor Strange was 85 days. You know, our AD had just come off Spectre before Doctor Strange. Spectre was 135 days. You know, and it's like the way Marvel movies are very efficiently made. They're very financially rigid, and they take their finances very seriously. I think that's for the good of the movie for the most part, because those longer budgets are not necessarily in service to good storytelling. But I find, to get to your first question, I liked being on shooting more material every day, working faster, moving faster, working with live actors, working in a real space. Oh my God, there's nothing more exhausting than shooting in an all-green stage all day. It is so tedious and tiring, because a lot of times those shots are so technically specific. If you get 7 or 8 shots a day, that's a good day. You know, as opposed to getting 25 or 30 shots a day shooting a movie like this. And your life just ticks away as you're waiting for things to get right.
But that delayed gratification of being on a green screen stage and knowing that I won't get to experience how this shot feels for months and months and months when they put in the... Is there something that you prefer about looking at the monitor and going, right now what I'm looking at is everything the audience is going to see? Like, I don't have to wait for something to be...
Clearly there's much more immediate satisfaction in doing that. You know, for sure, it's a lot more fun, it's a lot more rewarding in the moment to do it. But, you know, it does, but I enjoy making a big special effects movie, you know, I'd do it again. Because it's, in the end, it's about whether or not you're envisioning something exciting. You know, that can be, that's also very rewarding. You know, I think any version of that where you're not sure what you're going to do with all that green would be hell. You know, I would never do that. And I've been asked to do movies where I just knew that was the situation I'd end up in. A lot of green screen movies get made that way, where, you know, they just know they're going to figure it out in post.
We'll figure it out later again.
Yeah, and I can't work that way.
Do you have a favorite stage of filmmaking?
Editing by far.
Why is that?
Well, because the rest of it's terrible.
So tell me why the rest of it's terrible. Like, what makes it great?
Writing, you know, I'm not a born writer. Like, my writing, I write with a partner. You know, my writing partner, Cargill, is a very successful novelist, very good novelist, and he's a born writer. He loves writing. Writing is a trip to the dentist every time. And I've gotten good at it, but I never really enjoy it. It's the Dorothy Parker adage, I hate writing, but I love to have written. I feel that way. You know, I just don't ever enjoy the process of doing that. And I think it's the most, for me, it's just kind of anguish, you know? And I do a lot of it. Production is exciting, but, you know, production is exhausting. You know? And I'm just I don't know. I'm just the kind of guy who's, if I'm writing, I'm like, I just want to be on set. If I'm on set, I was like, I just miss writing. You know? And I don't really like either. But production is much more enlivening, but it can be really exhausting. It's like this shoot, it was like contending with the weather, the schedule, the pressure, that sort of thing. Shooting a big Marvel movie, by the way, thing that nobody tells you is how fucking exhausting a big shoot like that is. I mean, it's like running a marathon. Mm-hmm. And when you're done with it, with a big production like that, the physical toll that is taken on you, the mental toll that is taken on you, is extreme. I mean, Robert Downey Jr. showed up at the Doctor Strange premiere just to support the movie, which I thought was really great. I'd only met him once, and on the red carpet, you know, he had made all these Marvel movies, and he walked up to me. I'd met him once on the Civil War set, and he walked up to me. He goes, "How you doing? How's your life? Are you divorced?" First question. Are you come out dust or steel? Which are you? You know, and it's like, it gets better, it'll get easier. The next one's easier. And it's like he was trying to immediately tell me, like, he just understood. He saw so many directors just have their souls crushed and their bodies crushed by doing those. So editing.
That's my application for Doctor Strange 3.
But editing is you know, the old adage is you write a movie 3 times. You write it when you write it, you write it when you shoot it, and you write it when you edit it. And I think that's true. I think anybody who's good at the job is always writing and always, not slavish to any particular thing and looking for what's living and alive. But in editing, man, watching it all come together and being able to rewrite what you've made and reconfigure and breathe more dimensions into it is the greatest feeling in the world for me. And I just like that whole process, and I like not letting go of it until it's taken away from me, basically, And I learned, that's one of the things I learned from working with both Jerry Bruckheimer and Kevin Feige. Those guys really taught me that you can always make it better. There's a line in this movie. I'm not going to tell you which one it is, but there's a line in this movie that I ADR'd with one of the actors 6 weeks ago, having finished the film over 9 months ago. And there was a little problem that I detected from a couple of the responses that I saw from the screening, and I realized, we can fix that. I know, we can ADR this line. And I went to Jason Blum and Universal, and it was expensive. But I convinced him, it really matters, this is why. And we got it was one of the kids' lines, and we got the kid back, and his voice had changed. I was like, you gotta pitch it higher, man. and we put the line in, and I'm telling you, it actively made the movie better. And so it's like, I love the editing process because I can still do that. I still worked on the movie 6 weeks ago. That's great.
My favourite part is sound mixing, because editing, all I do is lie on the floor and go, I fucked it up!
Oh, great.
And do what I want to do!
Yeah.
Sound mixing is like all champagne.
It's all champagne, but I think of that as part of editing too. I think of the whole editorial process. I'm talking about post-production, all of it. Yeah.
I like scalpel sound mixing right out of there. That's my favourite. I'm just on cloud 9 for that whole process. Well, I got all that work and all those little changes that you made to make it better. Those last-minute changes have resulted in something so great. It's so tense. The scene where he's trying to use the bike lock and Ethan Hawke is in the background nearly killed me. So as a horror fan, I have to say thank you and thank you. I think that's it. I'm not sure. Karen, am I supposed to ask? That's it? Okay, fine.